So your weight loss has stopped and you feel like the GLP-1 just isn't working anymore. You might even be thinking it's time to increase your dose. But before you go and ask your doctor for a higher dose, try some of the suggestions in this video because in most cases, we can solve the problem with a few little tweaks. I'm going to walk you through specific tools which I use with my clients as a nutritionist when we see GLP-1 weight loss stop or slow right down. You'll be able to use all of these tools at home easily without spending any extra money or making huge changes. And you might want to save this video and come back to it later because there is a lot of information in here. First, let's talk about food noise and cravings. If you feel like food noise is coming back and you're craving the old foods like sugary treats and fast foods, this is actually a phenomenon that I see all the time. And I suspect it has something to do with two things. One, our dopamine pathway, and also our gut bacteria. We have specific bacteria in our gut that makes us crave sugar, especially. And unfortunately, the only way to stop these cravings is to starve those little buggers for a little while so that they can't hijack our thinking anymore. It really is that simple. So you need to just cut it off. Cut off the supply so that you can starve those bacteria out of your gut. Now, this only takes a couple of days to do, but once you cut it off, you will naturally start craving less sugary foods. The good news is the cravings seem to disappear much faster while we're on a GLP-1, so it usually really only takes a couple of days. While you're working on reducing cravings, increase your protein intake because this will help to starve off those bacteria and it will increase the population of the bacteria that you actually want. And protein will also help to calm your dopamine pathway. Now, if food noise isn't the problem, the next thing is doing a complete lifestyle overhaul. So I've noticed after a few months, we tend to relax into the new GLP-1 lifestyle, right? We can sometimes forget about the things that we did in the very beginning. And as time goes by, we start to introduce foods or old habits that we had before the GLP-1. And this can be things like drinking alcohol more often or eating more regularly than we did in the beginning of the GLP-1 journey. And this is all very normal. But if we want to break through the weight stall, we also need to do a complete overhaul on our diet and our exercise routine and find those things that we may have reintroduced subconsciously or unknowingly over the last couple of months. I've noticed I've done this myself. It's a fairly normal thing that we all go through as human beings. After all, long-term change requires consistent focus and a mindset shift. Another big one is foods which cause inflammation, especially if you are perimenopausal or you're going through menopause now. So these things can be things like eating dense processed carbohydrate foods or drinking drinks that are very sugary or eating sugary foods. Or a big one, which a lot of us don't think about until it's brought to our attention, is foods that we might have an intolerance to. So knowing if you have an intolerance is really important because if there is inflammation, there is most likely leaky gut. And if there is leaky gut, there is weight gain in 90% of people. So here are the most common intolerances in adults which could be interfering with weight loss. So the first one is lactose intolerant. I think we've all heard about that. Gluten insensitivity, which is non-celiac. So gluten insensitivity causes digestive discomfort, brain fog, and fatigue after eating wheat, barley, or rye. Normally, it doesn't include intestinal damage that you see in somebody that is celiac, but it can cause leaky gut and therefore inflammation and therefore weight gain. Fructose intolerance is another one, and this happens when people have difficulty absorbing fructose, which is a fruit sugar. So it's found in fruits, honey, and of course, high fructose corn syrup. It's very common and it often goes undiagnosed. So it leads to bloating, gas, and diarrhea most often. Another one is histamine intolerance, which is caused by the inability to break down histamine properly. And the triggers include aged cheeses, wine, fermented foods, and cured meats. Symptoms can include headaches, hives, nasal congestion, and digestive issues. Another one is FODMAP sensitivity. So FODMAPs are a group of fermentable carbohydrates found in things like onions, garlic, legumes, wheat, and many fruits as well. It's very strongly linked to IBS symptoms like bloating, cramping, and alternating constipation and diarrhea. Another one, unfortunately for some, is caffeine sensitivity. So some people metabolize caffeine very slowly due to a genetic variation, which leads to anxiety, insomnia, and heart palpitations, and even digestive upset with very small amounts of caffeine. So if that sounds like you, cut out the caffeine. And then sulfite sensitivity, which is quite a common one now. So sulfites are preservatives which are used in winemaking, dried fruits, and processed foods. They can trigger headaches, asthma-like symptoms, and skin reactions. So those are the basics, but let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a deep dive on food intolerances. And later, I'm going to talk more about GLP-1 medication and tolerance, which is also really important to understand. But first, let's keep going with the smaller tweaks so you can work through those first. Just quickly, if you find this information helpful, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and share it with a friend who might find this helpful as well. I'd really appreciate the help to grow my little channel. Okay, another big one is movement. Have you relaxed on the exercise that you were doing when you first started? If you have, it's completely normal. More movement, no matter what type of movement that is, will naturally increase your energy expenditure. And remember, from my other videos, that means calorie burning. And here's the thing. Some people I've spoken to have mentioned that they have diet fatigue, which comes from years of on and off diets, right? And I totally understand this because I have been there myself and it is mentally exhausting. But we need to think about GLP-1 journey as a tool to make weight loss easier. It can't be the whole solution because it does eventually stop working for so many people. And I'll explain a little bit later why that is. I personally feel like we need to use it as our kickstart to get our health and our weight loss on track, because if for whatever reason we can't continue to take the GLP-1 at some point, the odds are really stacked against us. Most people gain all the weight back and they've wasted the whole GLP-1 experience. So, easiest way around the diet fatigue is to reset the way we think about it. I've spoken in other videos about mindset and how important a shift in perception is, so I'm not going to go into it again here. But if you're interested in learning how to train your brain for lasting weight loss so that you don't get the diet fatigue, check out my private membership. I go into the exact steps on how I retrained my brain to keep my weight off for 15 years without any medications. Essentially, training your mind allows you to stick with it without the constant torture and exhaustion. All right, so to get the scales moving again, we need to realize that as we lose weight, our body doesn't need as much energy to move around. You may have lost 20 pounds, for example, but if you're still eating the same amount as you did when you first started the GLP-1, you would hit a stall because your body simply doesn't need that much energy anymore. So in this example, you would need to either increase your activity or you would need to decrease your calories. For most people, it's much easier to increase movement, and the benefits of extra movement go far beyond weight loss anyway. You'll sleep better, you'll decrease anxiety and depression, you'll absorb more nutrients from movement, and even ease constipation. So let's sidestep just for a quick moment and do a quick recap on calories. Remember, calories are just energy. So when you think of calories, you need to think of them as just energy. When we think of body fat, we need to think of it as stored energy, because that's all it really is. We tend to have a very emotional reaction when we associate body fat in our mind. But if we can bring it back to physics and just change the way we think about it to the most basic biological viewpoint and think of the fat on our thighs as energy that just needs to be used up, we can start to make different choices more easily because it becomes less about emotion and it's more about just biology, right? Okay, here's another one that I hear quite often, and it is the low carb trap. So let's say you're already eating quite low carb let's say you've watched a couple of my other videos and you understand how insulin is a storage hormone and you have gone about lowering your insulin levels. You might even be doing keto. So you can't understand why the scale isn't moving, especially while on a GLP-1. After all, you're following the best combination for weight loss, right? Here's what you need to know. When you've been keto for a while, our body does get used to it. Our body will always adapt. It's wonderful like that. So here's what I've noticed. Most people on keto tend to have more added fat because they're not eating carbohydrates. And there's nothing wrong with that. But here's the thing. Fat is calorie dense. It has 9 calories per gram. When you think of a recipe which might have an extra quarter of a cup of olive oil added to it, for example, that's an extra 480 calories, which you need to burn off before you dip into your own fat stores. So to give you an example of what that might look like in real life for my body, I would have to go for an hour-long run to burn off those extra calories before my body even touches the fat on my thighs. So it's easier just to reduce the added fat until you break through the stall. I hope that makes sense. So I'm not saying to go low fat. That's not healthy, especially when you're doing keto or low carb, and it would actually work against you. What I'm saying is reducing the added fat for a couple of weeks to see if it has an impact, which usually can help most people. Remember, when doing keto, the goal is to get your body eating up your own fat stores for energy. If you're adding a lot of fat to your diet, your body has to burn that fat up first. I actually did a podcast on why the keto diet is the best diet to follow with a GLP-1. If you're interested, I will pop the link in the description for you so you can listen to that after this video. Okay, next, let's talk about nutrients and our little mitochondria. And this is probably one of the most overlooked topics in all of weight loss and nutrition. And choosing the types of foods you eat is probably the most important thing while on a GLP-1, because we're not eating as much as we used to, but our body still needs all of the essential nutrients to drive our metabolic rate. Our metabolism is very dependent on micronutrients. If we become deficient, our metabolic rate will slow down. It has no choice. It's sort of like trying to drive a car with no fuel. There are certain nutrients which are imperative to fuel metabolism. I go into that in a lot more detail in my Smarter Shrinking ebook bundle, which is available to purchase. So I'll put that in the link below if that interests you. And it's really important to ensure that you're getting all of your nutrients from food. Supplements can certainly help when diet falls short, but the best source is always foods first. So you need to be choosing foods that are nutrient rich, that include a wide variety of vegetables, lower carbohydrate fruits like berries and animal protein foods, and foods which contain natural fats like coconut and avocado. You want whole foods. So let's talk about the receptor phenomenon. What I'm about to explain is something that is quite common, but nobody seems to be talking about it with their patients when they start a GLP-1 medication. So here's how this works. When we take a GLP-1 hormone, that hormone is going to attach to specific receptors which live on the outside of our cells. The hormones we're injecting are superhuman amounts, right? The medication is in amounts that our body would never ever pump out naturally. And our own GLP-1 hormones would never last as long as what the GLP-1 medication does. So what happens is our cells can see this as being screened at constantly. After a little while, our receptors can become desensitized to the medication because after a while, the cells get tired of being yelled at. And what happens is they start to retract to the inside of the cell, which then means the hormone can no longer reach them. And there's even evidence that the receptors start to disappear altogether. This is the body's natural adaptation process. And it does this even with other medications or with things like coffee. You know, when you first start drinking coffee, you only need a little bit, and then all of a sudden you need lots of it to get the same effect. So this process is called downregulation. This is one of the reasons I personally have not gone up in dose with my medication, because I know after a while it creates a bit of a biological trap, if you know what I mean. But if we can stay on lower doses and instead focus on creating our own GLP-1 hormones to work with the drug whilst we take it, and even long after, even if we need to come off the medication at some point, it's much less jarring on the body and probably more sustainable in the long term. Look, that's just my personal thoughts based on the current science. So I will leave that with you and your doctor to decide what is best for you. Okay, if you found this information helpful, please remember to like and subscribe and share it with a friend who might also find it helpful. And if you would like more tips to break a weight plateau, watch this video next. If you would like to learn more about my private membership, where I go through a lot of detail about nutrition, how to increase your own metabolic rate, and train your mind for lasting weight loss, check out this video for more information, and I will see you in one of those videos.
Smarternuthub Nutrition. GLP done well. Be a Smarternuthub.